So welcome to the Treasury Elite Entrepreneur Series. I would like to thank all our viewers and members for supporting this noble cause of Treasury Elite, whose main objective is networking, knowledge sharing, and mentoring. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Abhishek Goenka, founder and CEO, IFA Global and Treasury Elite. We bring in one-stop treasury and FX portfolio management services for companies across India for the last 16 years. And today we have Mr. Girish Vanwari, the founder for Transaction Square. Girish is synonymous with the tax and M&A practice in India. He brings in 27 years of consulting experiences with global brands like KPMG and Arthur Andersen. He's worked with many large multinationals and Indian promoter families in advising them on various business, tax, and regulatory issues across various industries. Welcome, Girish. How are you doing today?
Very, very well. Thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's really an honor.
Glad to have you today as a part of the Treasury Elite Entrepreneurship Series. In the next few minutes, would love to know and learn from your experiences and some of the latest trends in business and M&A space. So Girish, this is the question I ask to every single entrepreneur whom I interact, is that, what keeps you moving? And, what keeps you excited every morning and get to work? And if I may ask, what is your why?
Actually, I love what I do. So I love to see people succeeding, and I really love what I do. So there is no question of having an off day or a day when you don't feel like moving. So I love what I do, and I love making a difference to my clients, and I love seeing them succeed and go to the next level in their lives. So it's like that doctor likes to do surgeries and see his clients or patients get all right. That's what I am. So I fundamentally love what I do. This is my purpose. So that really keeps it going and keeps it going. COVID, no COVID, upside, downside, doesn't matter really.
That's fantastic. I mean, very few people, when they give this introduction, they say this line 3 times, that I love what I do. And I think if that is sorted in life, I think all the job becomes. So we have all had our ups and downs. Would love to know some of your important milestones over the last 3 years and learnings in your entrepreneurial journey. And how is it different from working with companies like KPMG and Arthur?
It is 95% same. 95% same is because in KPMG we were working for clients, we were working for the whole ecosystem, we were adding value, we were building teams. So when I left back with a team of 2,000 people. That's the team size I used to lead with 80 partners in it. So in all scale of leadership, in all scale of entrepreneurship, it was very big. And today I have a team of 200 people, so 2,200. So I have a team, 10% size of the team, which I led. So 95% is all the same. It's working on clients, building teams, and doing great work. But the 5% which is different is all the differentiator. So the first big difference which is there in entrepreneurship versus working in big firms is that in big firm it's management and professionalism. So you spend a lot of time managing. You're managing 2,000 people, managing teams, process, systems. Whereas in entrepreneurial firm, it's entrepreneurship and professionalism. So you are building a business, you're experimenting, you are, going out and making new things happen. You're agile, you're moving fast, you have a people to manage. So the management got replaced by that inner zeal to do something big. So that's the first difference I saw. And second difference I saw is the proportionate time which was spent on management was disproportionate to professional. So like take an example of a doctor. A doctor likes to do surgeries. Doctor likes to cure. But you put a doctor in a CEO role to manage a hospital, he would spend 90% of the time managing a hospital. oxygen comes, oxygen doesn't come, so on and so forth. So I was at a stage where 90% time I was managing and not being with clients. So maybe 10% time I got to be with my clients. Whereas now 10% time I spend on everything else, whereas 90% time I solve problems for clients. So there's in my own personal time frame. That's the second difference I would see. And third difference is I'm chasing a dream. So people are dependent upon me. People, I'm responsible to the families who are associated with us, responsible to the clients who trust us. So the responsibility is far more than being in a big organization. So there are three differences I see in the last, and fourth difference which I see in what I do today is that empathy is a very big part of it. So when you're an entrepreneur, you have to have empathy. You always had empathy in life, but it becomes a very, very important reminder on every day that you need the ecosystem to support you to succeed. And you have to be empathetic and kind and making sure you grow everybody along with you and not which in a big firm you can manage. You can take those risks and get going. Whereas in entrepreneurship, you can't take that kind of risk.
Right.
So 95% is similar, but 5% what is different is very different.
No, very well said. Very well said. So with this, what message would you like to give to the senior professionals, partners, senior partners in the big fours who often think of starting but somehow get stuck in the golden handcuff scenario? I know a few of them, but somehow they're not able to come out.
I think, I've been thinking about this, and somebody says that how successful your business model will be. So I would say our business model will be successful wherever. And I'll tell you why. There are big fours and there are entrepreneurial firms. And there's a huge entry barrier to do what we did. And that entry barrier is fear. I don't see many professionals who are getting substantial salaries to leave their comfort zones and be on the street. That's a huge entry barrier.
Correct.
That's a huge tailwind to our success because I know there will not be many transaction squares. So that entry barrier is very, very huge. Now, when will people cross that entry barrier and get into this kind of a thing? It's person to person. But the way typical careers move is that, you start from very humble backgrounds. Many of us, we don't start at very rich backgrounds as very successful people. We start with the lowest levels in firms. We grow ourselves up. In the process, get married, need to buy a house, need to buy a car, and then start taking loans. So the job becomes more and more relevant. And then you reach 30, 35, you have kids. By the time you have 40, the children's education is tearing you. So your financial commitments keep growing with your income. And by the time you're 50, 55, your financial commitments are even huge because your children need MBAs overseas and so on and so forth. So the comfort zone becomes a necessity. So that's what I see in Big Four partners. By 50, 55, they need their firms more than ever before. And then they become dependent on their firm financially because they see their children growing and the needs keep going up. So they can't leave and start afresh. Whereas what typically happened in my career is that I grew very fast. I became a tax head at 40 and I did 6-7 years as tax head. So by the time I left KPMG, I was 45, 46. So because I grew very fast, I had 10 years heads up. And that was thanks to Anderson actually. Anderson really grew up. And Anderson grew people quicker than what other firms normally do. And that's the head start which I had, which enabled me to take that risk. And I had a very severe inner calling that I had to do this. So I would take this risk either way. I would take this risk either way because it's a strong inner voice which I have. Otherwise, I think there is a big entry barrier.
Correct.
Like this.
Of course, I know people have been discussing this every year. but somehow very difficult to leave the comfort zone. And especially as you said, as soon as you start hitting 50, then it's become more difficult. And I think that's the interesting message that can go to the people who are in the early 30s before getting into big financial obligations, But lovely. So, Girish, it's a pretty exciting time in the VC and the private equity space, And of course, in the next 5-10 years, the way India is positioned, I think lots of money is going to come, and slowly we are also seeing the deal sizes that every city is getting going up, and uh, we are slowly moving towards, I think, from a venture capital to a little bit on the private equity space, more matured. The amount size is also growing. What's your thoughts? Where are we in this chain? Can we compare ourselves with any country which has been in this in the past? And how should old economy business families, who are really, sometimes they question it, sometimes they have a FOMO feeling, sometimes they're just surprised. How should we look into this?
I would say there are two, three things which I see around me. First is the markets are going up. And the question is that will the markets continue to go up? Will we have more Zomatos? Will we have more Policybazaar, Nykaa, so news? And I think that the fundamental changes happened because of COVID. Countries have printed a lot of money. And second is the interest rates have gone down. So like FT of 8-9% is now 3 or 4%. So that change is forever. So if that change is forever, money will flow to the markets. And if money will flow to the markets, capital formation will happen. Money will move to investments. And that could be in the form of individual money, mutual fund money, private equity, VCs, and that change is forever. That change is forever. Second change, which we try and deny, which we try and ignore, which is also forever, is a digital change, digital revolution. I mean, Swiggy's, Zomatos are here to stay. That's a habit change. It's happened. When Infosys, Wipro got listed for the first time, first 3-4 years, they didn't do well on the stock market. And there was a lot of skepticism, like, body shopping, and will they ever succeed, and what will happen? But eventually they did very well. They are compounders. So you see 10 years down the line, the top 10 companies, 4-5 will be the stocks which are like these digital stocks. I don't know what will be in that, but certainly 4-5 of them will be as big as TCS or a Reliance as we see. So that's the second change which has happened. So which means VC money will flow. So now I see there's a blur between P and VC. P is also investing in digital. So it's not that only VCs are changing the good story. It's not only SoftBank running behind new age companies. I saw Temasek also hungry. I saw Blackstone also hungry by investing into Byju's. Temasek to Licious. So I see a tremendous shift in the digital format. Second. Third is, will digital format replace the old economy? Answer is no. It will enable old economy. So metals will be metals. Cars will be cars. They'll be digitally enabled. So whatever we are doing, it's going to be digitally enabled. Like, I'm not going to be replaced. I mean, I have brains, so people will come to me. But how I deliver compliance will be more digital. Whereas the products will be there, the digital delivery will be there, the middlemen will get eroded, which is what retail and like different kinds of middlemen, brokers, those are all getting eroded. That's where the change is happening. So old economy is here to stay, thrive. And the last change I see is the change in mindset of us, you and me. Today, you and me also want to secure ourselves. So we would also want to build wealth outside our companies. We would also like to create security for our families. So we saw people dying in COVID. We saw relatives going away. So businessman today is thinking that if I have 100% in one company, I don't need to. If I get to run the company, if I have 40-50%, let's do IPO, let's do private equity, let's create a family office, let's create the future. So everybody who was putting all his life in one company now is diversified.
Correct.
And that's the fourth change which I see happening. So you'll have many more family offices, you'll have many more alternate investments, you'll have many more money chasing VC and new ideas. So I would not say VC itself. There is VC, there is P, there is AMCs, and family offices. There are you and me. Suppose if I came to you, come Abhishek, let's invest together in Licious. You would say, please tell me.
Yeah, people are very open.
Yeah, so that's a fourth change I see around me. So I repeat the trends which I see around me. First is the trend of get to equity, that shift which we saw. Second is the digital trend which we saw. Third is the
So Girish, building talent has been very, very tricky for mid-size and professional services firms, especially in the world flooded with money. I was talking to one of my friends who's a senior partner at EY, and he said, Abhishek, we are rolling on offers and 40% of the people don't join. How do you build a world-class professional services firm? What is your style? Could you share some examples?
See, I think there are 2-3 things which define it. First is you have to have people who have to have that hunger for being entrepreneurs. So say transactions where the firm of everybody from the lowest level to the topmost level, they should feel that they are building the firm together. And that's the story for any startup, any passionate organization. So having the people who will build it together with you and not employees is what is important. And what I think is that we never run out of people we want. We can hire, we can add as many people to our teams. I would never say hire because we don't have employees. We only have people who build Transaction Square at any location. I mean, if I post a need at a location, we'll have 50 CVs coming in, and we really go through the entrepreneurial background, and people want to support, people want to learn. So I think having that ecosystem of giving people respect. So I learned in my life 2 things. First is people come not only because of money. It comes because of respect and money. So if you give only respect, you won't keep people. If you give only money, you won't keep people. If you keep people respect and money, you will have teams forever. Because that's where the big firms fail, because they don't respect people. They respect designations, they mechanically move people up. They give money, but there's no respect. There's no respect of an individual. So if you have a firm which has respect and money, you will differentiate yourself. And it's very difficult to have respect, in an organization. It's hierarchical respect. It's not human respect. So that's the change which I see. And this I've learned from the startups which I mentor, advise, consult. They respect their people. Absolutely. Talent has to be and paid also.
Yeah.
And second, I feel that in our firm that there is no employer-employee. There is we all together. We all empowered. We all together. The only criteria I see in hiring people is that love the firm. That's it. Even if you have no little less, no problem. We'll teach you. But just love the firm. Build the firm. Love it. This is your home. That's it. And that you can judge and find out.
I think that's a very, very important takeaway. Very valid for professional firms as well as the companies where 2 generations, 3 generations have passed. Yesterday only I was talking to someone who was a 3rd generation company, and somehow they were facing problems with attrition, and they're saying, "Ye contract lagayenge, wo contract lagayenge," and said the world has changed. You can't have good people working for you if this is the mindset. Lovely, Girish. It was very, very nice talking to you. I personally learned a lot during this conversation, and I was very impressed with the way you are building the firm. And I wish you and the entire team of 200 people going forward that you guys make a very, very successful firm and add a lot of values to your clients in all the spheres of practice that you guys are working on. I wish you all the best.